You may have noticed that the 6 Holland personality types are arranged around points on a hexagon. That's because Holland and others did a lot of research to determine how these 6 personality and work environment types relate to each other. This general concept is called consistency. Research indicates that types that are next door to each other, such as R and I and A, and A and S, are the most alike. Codes for people and occupations that are separated by 1 point on the hexagon are moderately consistent. Personality types and work environment types directly across from each other on the hexagon, such as R and S, I and E, and C and A, are most unlike. As you think about that, you will remember that the people with R personality like to work alone with tools and machines, while those with the S personality like to work face-to-face with people. C types like to organize and keep the world orderly. A types like to avoid structure, and I types like to work alone with abstract thinking, while E types can only be satisfied when working face-to-face with people. So you may be asking, what difference all that makes? Well, the consistency of a person's code may have 2 different effects. First, there are more occupations and jobs with consistent codes because their work tasks are more similar. Second, people with consistent codes are likely to have less difficulty in making career choices because they do not feel they are being pulled by different interests. Another common term that relates to Holland's theory is differentiation. This term refers to the shape of an individual's profile of the strength of the 6 types. In the Cooter career planning system, an individual's interests and skills are measured on a 7-point scale, so a person's scores can be shown in a graph like this one. Differentiation is the numerical difference between the lowest score and the highest score. In this example, the differentiation is 6, the difference between the level for R and the level for I. People with a well-differentiated profile, 1 or more Holland code types are high, are typically ready to make a career choice. Here are 2 other kinds of profiles. Individuals with high, relatively flat profiles have interest in all 6 types. They will need help in deciding which Holland codes to use in work and which to use in leisure or citizen activities. Individuals with relatively low, flat profiles do not yet have clearly defined interests. They need more time in career exploration. As Dr. Raymond indicates, Holland's theory does have some real strength as a foundation for the career planning services.
I think there are a number of strengths. Probably the first and most obvious is that the theory is really elegant in its simplicity. It's very easy for people to understand. It uses language that the layperson can understand, and it makes sense to people. It's a common sense kind of theory. So I think that's a great strength. I think another one is that it sort of has heuristic value. If you learn the Holland theory, it helps you to understand that the world of work is organized in some kind of a meaningful way. It's not just a kind of an amorphous mass of humanity, but like everything else, it can be classified and organized. Similarly, personality types can be classified and organized. So it provides, I think, both the clinician and the client with a vocabulary that they can use to talk about careers, about career development and choice, about personality characteristics, about work environments, and so forth. So I think those are some of the really key strengths of the Holland theory.
And here are some of the practical ways that you can use the theory.
Well, the first piece of advice that I would give would be to really familiarize yourself with the instruments you're going to use. If it's going to be the self-directed search or the VEEK, which is a little kit which includes flashcards and a number of other things, if you're going to use the VPI, take it yourself, familiarize yourself with it. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is make sure you get the professional manual, which is written very much in layperson's language. Anyone can understand it. It has a lot of good examples, client examples, how to deal with them, a lot of good examples about how to use normative data. And one of the nice things about Holland's theory is that it is supported by research, significantly supported by research. And Holland has collected and put in the professional manual a lot of normative data that's very helpful to people, I think. So those are the things that read the manual is probably the best piece of advice, and it's probably true of almost any instrument that you might use or any theory that you try to implement in a counseling situation. But that, to me, is the most important thing. And Holland has really done a nice job, I think. If he has a real strength, it's that he simplifies things, keeps everything simple for people to understand, and it's a great strength, I think.
In your work, you are likely to use individuals' Holland codes to help them identify occupations and post-secondary majors that match their code or nearly do so. The Cooter Career Planning System provides Holland codes for everyone taking its online interest or skills assessment. The system also provides the list of occupations and post-secondary majors that match their codes. This enables your clients and students to spend their time exploring those occupations rather than attempting to select from over 1,000 occupations and hundreds of majors. You now have an understanding of the theories of the two most eminent career theorists in the world. Let's hear how Dr. Niles suggests the two theories be used together.
In my opinion, the central core concepts of Donald Super's theory are threefold, and as described by Don Super, it's really a segmental theory that consists of lifespan, life space, and self-concept dimensions. And the, I think, unique feature of Super's theory relates to how comprehensive it is. That is, Super focused on the expression of career behavior across the lifespan. And that relates to the lifespan segment of his theory, obviously, which consists of life stages, growth, exploration, establishment, maintenance, and disengagement. And each of those life stages have specific developmental tasks associated with them. And so Super described the process of career development over time. That's a unique feature, especially when one considers the historical context from which the theory emerged. Which was more of a focus on a single point in time event of making a career choice. And Super shifted that to a lifespan orientation. The life space segment of Super's theory is perhaps the most unique feature of it. And it really, I think, is the one element of his theory that distinguishes it from perhaps all other theories. And in the life space theory segment, Super talked about the fact that one's career is comprised of the total constellation of life roles that one participates in over the course of a lifetime, and that we cannot assume that everyone has the same value for the role of worker. That for some people that role is central, for others it's more on the periphery. And we have to understand the life structure of each individual. That is, the life roles that they play, the salience or the importance they attach to those life roles, and then help them to implement a career choice within that life context so that it's sensitive to the fact that, as well as being a worker, a person may want to, for example, allocate a substantial amount of time to leisure or to being a homemaker or a partner or a parent, and so forth. So Super's life space theory segment is sensitive to each client's context relative to how they structure the essential roles of life. The final dimension, core element of Super's theory is the self-concept theory segment. And it has both objective and subjective elements. The objective elements focus on what has been termed the psychology of possession, how much interest or aptitude a person possesses, which is often determined by administering a formal standardized assessment, and is more typically associated with the career counseling process. The subjective element of of the self-concept relates to helping the client understand the thematic patterns in their life, the ways in which they make meaning out of the life experiences they've had, and then translate those meanings into a career direction. Super's technique for doing that, for helping a client become aware of those thematic patterns, was the thematic extrapolation method, which is really a narrative approach to career intervention, and again focuses on the ways in which people make meaning out of life experiences. So I think Super provides us with a very comprehensive structure from which to understand how careers develop in a way that is sensitive to each client's unique context.
Dr. Niles has already talked about three central foci of Super's theory. He talked about lifespan, life space, and also self-concept. I'd like to tie my answer to this question to those three ideas. And I'd like to try to build a case that Super's theory is really relevant for persons of all ages with all kinds of concerns. And I would defend that by first indicating that he studied this phenomenon of career development, career choice across the entire lifespan. I was fortunate enough to work with him in Charles County, Maryland, back in about 1980, in which we studied the beginning career development patterns for fourth graders and how they develop decision-making skills and so forth. And out of that work, he developed theory about how young children are either stimulated to have good career development or may not be stimulated to have good career development. And of course, in his career pattern study, he studied for a long longitudinal study of high school young people on through adulthood. And of course, as you look at the life stages and sub-stages that he proposes, he really has covered the entire lifespan from, as some say, from cradle to death. If we look at that second point, which was life space, Super always liked to represent things in a graphic way. He had a very nice way of doing that. And he gave us his life career rainbow somewhere in the 80s, which really defined career as a combination of what's going on in all the life roles at a given point in time, which means that his theory also helps us address not only the worker role, but all those other life roles which together intermingle with the worker role to create this phenomenon called career. And then third, the self-concept. And of course, in Super's terms, the self-concept was how you described yourself and the degree of realism with which you could describe yourself and the degree of detail you could put around that. And of course, he gave us many instruments to use to help people get that understanding, his interest inventories and inventories of career maturity and values inventories. And so the fact that he provided these practical tools and techniques, such as the life story that Dr. Niles has already mentioned, that help people get a good picture of their self-concept and then begin to expand it and understand it better and enrich it. All of those things make this theory applicable to people of all ages and of all kinds of populations.
Besides Holland's system of classifying occupations, there are others. One of those used extensively by high schools and community colleges is called the National 16 Career Clusters. This system organizes occupations into 16 groups, such as agriculture, architecture and construction, or health science, based on the industry to which each occupation relates. Each of the 16 clusters is subdivided into subgroups called career pathways. A career pathway contains a small group of occupations that focus on some subspecialty within the cluster. Here are the titles of those 16 national clusters. Your textbook gives you a definition of each of these clusters. The occupations in each of the career pathways are likely to have similar Holland codes. So, it is possible to align the career pathways with the 6 Holland clusters. This chart gives you a picture of how the national cluster system relates to the Holland system of classification. This information is provided because sites using the Cooter Career Planning System may choose either of these two ways to organize occupations, and the results of users' interest and skills assessments are presented in the chosen method. So, as you work with students and clients, you may see score reports that provide either a Holland code or a ranking of national career pathways and clusters.